It was a calm Sunday morning, the kind that made the whole street look peaceful and perfect. The lawns were trimmed, the birds were singing, and the smell of fresh grass mixed with the soft breeze. Sarah knelt beside the flowerbed in front of her new house, pressing soil around a small rose plant. She smiled quietly, happy to finally feel settled. After months of moving boxes, endless paperwork, and polite nods to her neighbors, she finally had a morning to herself. The neighborhood was new to her, clean and quiet, but there was something about it she hadn't learned yet. She had heard whispers that the HOA here was strict, but she never imagined how far that could go. She brushed dirt off her hands and looked at her garden proudly. "Perfect," she whispered to herself. The sound of a car door slamming broke her peace. Sarah looked up and saw a tall man walking toward her driveway. He wore a black uniform with the words HOA Enforcement stitched on the front pocket, a shiny badge on his chest, and dark sunglasses that hid his eyes. He held a small radio in one hand and a clipboard in the other. His steps were firm, almost heavy, like someone used to giving orders. Sarah stood up politely, unsure who he was but trying to be friendly. "Good morning," she said with a small smile. The man didn't smile back. Do you have HOA clearance to modify your yard?" he said in a sharp, cold voice. His tone sounded like a police officer's, but something about it felt off. "Clearance?" Sarah repeated, confused. "I'm just planting flowers, sir. I didn't think I needed permission for that." The man frowned. "This community has very specific landscaping rules," he said. "Every change needs to be approved by the HOA." Sarah blinked, surprised. "Oh, I read the guidelines when we moved in. It said we could plant anything as long as it doesn't block the view or the sidewalk. I'm following that." The man took a step closer, his boots crunching against the driveway gravel. "That's not how it works," he said sharply. "You people always think you can do what you want. But I'm the one who decides what's allowed here." His words caught her off guard. "You people?" she asked quietly. "What do you mean?" He ignored her question and pulled a small pad from his pocket. "Name and address," he said. "You'll be fined for this violation." Sarah frowned. "Violation? For planting flowers?" He slammed his hand on the hood of her car, the sound echoing down the quiet street. "Don't argue," he barked. "Do you want me to fine you right now?" The sudden noise made her flinch. She felt her heartbeat quicken, the peaceful morning turning into something tense and uncomfortable. Across the street, a curtain moved. One of the neighbors was watching. Another person peeked from behind a tree, pretending to check their mail. Sarah felt embarrassed, like she had done something wrong, even though she knew she hadn't. "Sir, I'm not trying to argue," she said softly. "But may I please see your ID? I've never met you before." The man smirked. "You don't need to see it," he said. "I'm HOA security. That's all you need to know." His arrogance filled the air like a bad smell. Sarah's hands trembled slightly. "My husband handles most of the HOA stuff," she said, trying to sound calm. "He's on his way home right now. Maybe you can talk to him." The man leaned forward slightly. "Oh, really? You think your husband can tell me what to do?" He chuckled, a low sound that made Sarah's stomach twist. "I run this neighborhood. People listen when I talk." His words were loud enough for the neighbors to hear, as if he wanted an audience. Sarah took a step back, her heart pounding faster. "Sir, please lower your voice," she said. "You're scaring me." His grin widened. "Good. Maybe you'll think twice before breaking rules again." He looked around proudly, like a bully showing off his power. "I could write you up for this, or maybe I should just call the board now." Sarah tried to stand her ground. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "I've read the guidelines." He stepped closer again, his shadow covering her. "You calling me a liar?" he snapped. "You women always think you can argue your way out of trouble." Before Sarah could react, he raised his hand and slapped her hard across the face. The sound echoed through the street. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek, the sting burning hot. A small gasp came from one of the nearby houses. The man's voice lowered to a growl. "Next time, you'll listen," he said. He turned and started walking back toward his car, his boots heavy on the pavement. For a few seconds, Sarah couldn't move. She stood frozen, her cheek throbbing, her heart racing so fast it hurt. Tears filled her eyes, not just from pain but from shock and humiliation. She had never been treated like that in her life. The man got into his car, slammed the door, and drove off. The sound of his tires squealing broke the quiet morning again. Sarah finally sank to the ground, her knees weak, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The neighbors who had been watching disappeared quickly, pretending they hadn't seen anything. Not one person came out to help. Sarah sat there for a long time, staring at the flowers she had just planted. The roses looked bright and innocent against the dirt, untouched by what had just happened. She wiped her tears and pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. Her hand hovered over the screen for a second before she finally called her husband. "Ethan," she said, her voice cracking. "Something happened." On the other end, his voice was calm and steady. "What's wrong?" "There was a man here," she said. "He said he was HOA security. He yelled at me, said I needed permission to plant flowers, and then he hit me." There was silence for a moment, a long, cold silence that scared her more than anything. "He what?" Ethan's voice dropped lower, steady but sharp. "Did you see his face?" "Yes," she whispered. "Black uniform, sunglasses, short hair, maybe mid-40s. He had a fake badge." Ethan's tone changed instantly. It wasn't just anger, it was focus. "Go inside. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone until I get there." "Ethan, please don't." "Sarah," he interrupted, calm but firm. "Go inside now." She obeyed. Her legs felt weak as she stepped inside the house and locked the door behind her. She leaned against the wall, breathing fast. Outside, the wind moved through the trees again, making everything look normal, as if the world hadn't just shifted. She looked out the window at her garden. The flowers she had planted still stood tall, but now they reminded her of the slap, the insult, the humiliation. She whispered softly, "He can't do this to me." Across town, Ethan's car sped down the road, his jaw clenched, his eyes sharp. He had seen combat before, faced danger head-on. But this was personal. He could already picture the scene, could already imagine the kind of man who would hit a woman just to feel powerful. He didn't raise his voice or curse. He didn't need to. His silence meant something far worse. He turned onto their street, his headlights cutting through the early evening shadows. When he pulled up, Sarah was standing at the door, her face pale. He got out and walked up the path without saying a word. When she saw him, she started crying again, and he held her quietly until she stopped shaking. He didn't ask too many questions right away. He just looked at her cheek, saw the redness, and his face darkened. "He's not a real officer," she whispered. "I could tell." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know, and that means he's made a big mistake." He turned his head toward the end of the street where the man had driven off. The quiet neighborhood looked peaceful again, but Ethan could feel the truth beneath it. Something rotten hiding behind all that order. "You're sure it said HOA on his badge?" "Yes," she said. But the badge looked cheap. It wasn't metal. It looked plastic. Ethan nodded again, his mind already working. "Okay," he said softly. "You did nothing wrong. You hear me? Nothing." Sarah nodded, still shaken. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Ethan looked at her for a moment, his expression calm, almost gentle. "I'm going to talk to him," he said. "And I'm going to make sure he never talks to anyone like that again." He walked to his car, opened the glove box, and pulled out a small black folder. Inside were his old Navy SEAL identification cards, a few contacts from law enforcement, and an old body camera he once used for training. He didn't plan on violence, but he wasn't going to let this go. He knew people like this fake officer, men who used fake power to control others, men who had never faced someone who truly knew what power meant. As the sun began to set behind the trees, Ethan looked out across the lake that bordered the neighborhood. The water reflected the orange light like fire. He whispered to himself, "You picked the wrong house." Then he went inside, kissed his wife on the forehead, and said, "Tomorrow, everything changes." That night, while the rest of the neighborhood slept peacefully, Ethan sat in his office with the lights low, writing down every detail Sarah had told him. He mapped out where the man came from, what kind of car he drove, and how he spoke. The calm silence around him wasn't peace, it was preparation. The man who had pretended to be an officer didn't know it yet, but he had just crossed paths with someone who wasn't afraid of him. And when Ethan finally found him, he would learn the hard way that real authority doesn't wear fake badges, it earns them. The next morning the neighborhood looked peaceful as usual, but for Sarah, peace felt like a stranger now. Every sound made her flinch. Every car that slowed near the house made her heart pound. She hadn't slept properly since the man's visit. Her cheek was no longer red, but the memory of his hand still burned in her mind. Ethan, on the other hand, was calm in a way that was almost frightening. He had spent the night quietly researching, looking through HOA documents, online records, and security footage from nearby streets. He didn't tell Sarah everything he found because he didn't want her to worry, but inside, a storm was brewing. The fake officer had crossed a line Ethan couldn't forgive. That morning, Sarah stood by the window, sipping coffee, her eyes scanning the street nervously. "Do you think he'll come back?" she asked softly. Ethan, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, replied without looking up, "If he does, he won't stay long." His voice was steady, confident. He clicked through a few files, then leaned back and said, "I found something strange. That badge he wore? It's not registered with any HOA in the county. Not one. The radio he had was a cheap knockoff, sold online for $30. Sarah frowned. "So he's not just fake. He's pretending to be part of the HOA. Ethan nodded. "Exactly. He's using their name to scare people." He stood up, stretching his shoulders. "I talked to a friend in local law enforcement last night. They'll keep an eye on things, but I want to handle this myself first." Sarah put her cup down, worry filling her eyes. "Ethan, please don't do anything dangerous." He gave her a calm smile. "I won't. I'm not starting a fight. I'm ending one." He walked out to his truck, his movements quiet but purposeful. He drove slowly around the neighborhood, observing. It didn't take long before he noticed something off. Parked down the block near the corner was a dark SUV, the same one Sarah had described the day before. The fake officer was standing beside it, talking to another homeowner. Ethan stopped his truck a few houses away, rolled his window down slightly, and watched. The man's voice carried even from a distance, loud and controlling. "You've got too many decorations on your porch," he barked at the homeowner. "It violates HOA standards." The woman looked confused, clutching her grocery bag. "But no one ever said anything before," he cut her off, raising his voice. "Do you want me to report you?" The woman backed away, muttering apologies she didn't owe. Ethan's jaw tightened. He grabbed his phone and began recording from the truck, zooming in on the man's fake badge. The details matched Sarah's description perfectly. Same black uniform, same patch, same arrogance. Ethan got out of the truck and started walking slowly toward him, not rushing, not calling out, just closing the distance one step at a time. The man noticed him halfway and turned. "Can I help you?" he asked in a sharp tone. Ethan stopped about 6 feet away, his expression calm, his voice low. "Yeah, you can. You were at my house yesterday." The fake officer's posture shifted slightly, like a snake sensing danger. "Your house? I don't know what you're talking about." "You slapped my wife," Ethan said simply. The man's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered. "You must have me confused with someone else. I'm an HOA officer. Maybe your wife didn't follow regulations." "You're not an officer," Ethan interrupted. "And you're not HOA." The man's hand twitched near his belt where his fake radio hung. "Watch your tone," he said, raising his chin. "You don't know who you're talking to." Ethan took a step closer. "Actually," he said quietly, "I know exactly who I'm talking to." His voice was calm but heavy, the kind of voice that came from someone who'd seen worse men crumble under less pressure. You walked into my yard, threatened my wife, and hit her. That's assault. That's impersonating an official. And that's a mistake. The fake officer laughed nervously, trying to sound confident. You think you can scare me? I deal with people like you every day. Ethan smiled faintly. No, he said. You've never dealt with someone like me. The man shifted uncomfortably. Look, buddy, maybe your wife misunderstood. Ethan cut him off again. I recorded everything you just said. And guess what? The police already know who you are. That made the man pause. His fake authority cracked for the first time. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice wasn't steady anymore. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. Here's my bluff, he said, showing his Navy SEAL commander credentials. You hit a Navy SEAL's wife and pretended to be law enforcement. How do you think that's going to end for you? The man's face turned pale. His mouth opened but no words came out. He took a step back, glancing around as if looking for help. The few neighbors who had come out to watch were recording with their phones now. The truth was spreading fast. Ethan didn't move closer. He didn't need to. His calmness was enough to make the man squirm. You've got two choices, Ethan said evenly. Turn yourself in, or I'll make sure every cop in this county has your face by the end of the day. The man's voice cracked as he tried to laugh it off. You can't prove anything. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. I don't need to. My wife can. And the neighbors. And the camera on my truck that's been recording you since you got here. He pointed back toward his vehicle, the small lens blinking red on the dashboard. The man froze, realization flooding his face. He turned suddenly, trying to walk away, but Ethan called out, You leave this neighborhood again and you'll have police waiting at your next stop. Your fake badge won't save you. The man muttered something under his breath and got into his SUV, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. He drove off quickly, tires screeching, disappearing around the corner. The crowd that had gathered murmured quietly. Someone clapped softly. Another person whispered. Finally, someone stood up to him. Ethan turned to the woman he had been threatening earlier. Are you okay? He asked gently. She nodded, still shaken. Thank you, she said. He's been harassing people for weeks. We didn't know what to do. Ethan gave her a reassuring nod. You don't have to worry about him anymore. When he returned home, Sarah was waiting at the door, anxious. Did you find him? She asked. Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, I found him. She searched his face for clues. What happened? He put a hand on her shoulder. He knows his court. I recorded him. I also called my contact at the sheriff's office. They're opening a case on him. Sarah exhaled in relief but still looked worried. Will he come back? Ethan shook his head. Not to this street. Not again. He stepped inside, poured himself a glass of water, and stared out the window. The lake outside looked peaceful again, but he knew the calm wouldn't last until justice was fully served. Somewhere out there, the man was panicking, trying to figure out how much trouble he was in. Ethan knew that feeling. It was the kind of fear only guilt could bring. That night, Ethan sent the recordings to his law enforcement contact and a lawyer who specialized in HOA violations. He didn't want revenge. He wanted the truth exposed publicly so no one else would be tricked again. The next morning, a deputy called him back. You were right, the deputy said. The guy's name is Derek Sloan. He's been posing as HOA enforcement in 3 different neighborhoods. We've been looking for him for months. You just gave us everything we needed. Ethan smiled slightly. Glad to help. Just make sure he doesn't hurt anyone else. The deputy replied, Don't worry. We've got a warrant ready. We'll take it from here. When Ethan hung up, he turned to Sarah, who was sitting on the couch, finally smiling again. It's over, he said softly. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. You always say that, she whispered. But this time, I think you mean it. Ethan smiled faintly, walking over to her. I do. Because men like him don't win. Not when people stand up. Outside, the sun rose high above the lake, reflecting light across the calm surface. The peace that had been broken was slowly returning. But as Ethan looked out at the neighborhood, he knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of something bigger. Because one thing was certain. If someone could pretend to be HOA authority to harm others, then there was a deeper problem hiding beneath all those rules and lawns. And Ethan, the man who had spent his life facing danger, was now ready to face this new kind of battle. One that wasn't fought with weapons but with truth and justice. Why the next morning the entire neighborhood was talking about what had happened. News traveled faster than gossip, and everyone had their own version of the story. Some said the man had been arrested already, others whispered that he was part of some larger scam. But one thing was certain. The fear that had kept people silent was gone. Sarah woke up to messages from neighbors thanking her husband, saying how brave he was for standing up to the fake HOA cop. But Sarah didn't feel brave. She still jumped at loud noises and found herself checking the locks twice before bed. Ethan noticed. He didn't push her to talk. He just stayed close, quieter than usual, watching, thinking. He knew the battle wasn't over. People like that man didn't disappear easily, and something told him the story ran deeper than just one bully with a fake badge. That morning, Ethan received a call from his law enforcement contact, Officer Reed, an old friend from his Navy days. "Ethan, you might want to hear this," Reed said, his voice serious. "We tracked your guy, Derek Sloan. You were right about him running scams. He's part of a group pretending to be HOA officers, shaking down homeowners for fake violations. But here's the thing, he didn't act alone. We think someone from your actual HOA gave him access to records." Ethan's eyes narrowed. Someone inside helped him. "Exactly," Reed said. "We found a list of properties he targeted, and yours was on top. Whoever fed him that info knew when you and your wife moved in." Ethan's jaw clenched. "That means it wasn't random," he said. "They wanted to scare her." Reed hesitated before answering. "We think they were trying to push new homeowners into paying fake fines. Some people already did. They were too afraid to question it." Ethan thanked him and hung up, his mind already spinning. He walked into the kitchen where Sarah was making coffee. "He wasn't acting alone," he said. Sarah looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "Someone in the HOA gave him information about us, our move-in date, maybe even details about you." Her hands froze midair. "Why would anyone do that?" "Money," Ethan said coldly. "Fear. Power. The usual reasons." He picked up his jacket and grabbed his keys. "I'm going to the HOA office." Sarah's voice rose slightly. "Ethan, please, just let the police handle it." He turned to her, calm but firm. "I will. But first, I need to see who's behind it." When he reached the HOA office, everything looked normal. Flowers outside, clean windows. Polite receptionist, but the quiet felt fake. The receptionist greeted him nervously. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" Ethan gave a small smile. "I just want to speak with whoever handles compliance records." She hesitated. "That would be Mr. Jennings, but he's in a meeting right now." Ethan nodded. "I'll wait." He sat down, his eyes scanning the office. On the wall hung photos of HOA board members, smiling faces, polished frames, community pride. But something in one of the photos caught his eye. In the corner of a group picture stood Derek Sloan, dressed in plain clothes but unmistakable. Ethan stood up slowly and walked to the receptionist. "Who's this?" he asked, pointing at Derek's face. The woman leaned forward. "Oh, that's one of our contractors. He helped with security last month." Ethan's eyes darkened. "Security?" "Yes, temporary assistance," she said quickly. "He said he was recommended by another HOA member, Karen Ellis." Ethan repeated the name under his breath. Karen was one of the loudest voices in the neighborhood, always complaining about small things, always acting like she ran the place. He thanked the receptionist and walked out, his mind already racing. When he got home, Sarah could see the anger in his eyes. "You found something, didn't you?" she asked. Yeah, he said, sitting down. The HOA hired him. At least that's what they're saying. But the one who brought him in, Karen Ellis. Sarah frowned. Karen? The one who yelled at the delivery guy last week. Ethan nodded. That's her. That evening, Ethan sat on the porch, staring at the lake. The sunset reflected across the water, painting everything orange and gold, but his mind was far from peaceful. He wasn't angry for himself. He was angry for everyone who had been bullied by people hiding behind fake power. He opened his phone, scrolling through HOA emails Sarah had saved. There it was, a message from Karen sent weeks ago, talking about new HOA security checks and asking residents to cooperate with inspections. She had set it up. Ethan's fingers tightened around the phone. She's the one who gave him access, he muttered. He called Reed again. I've got a name, Karen Ellis, he said. She's the one who brought him into the HOA. You might want to check her background. Reed sighed. Ethan, you should let us handle it. I will, Ethan said. But you'd better move fast. People like her don't sit still when they know they're caught. The next morning, Sarah noticed Karen walking door to door, smiling awkwardly at neighbors, pretending everything was fine. Ethan watched her from the window. She's cleaning up her mess, he said quietly. Sarah asked, what are you going to do? He replied, make sure she knows we're not afraid. Later that afternoon, Ethan walked down to the community center where Karen was organizing an HOA safety meeting. The irony wasn't lost on him. The room was half full, people chatting quietly. When Karen saw Ethan walk in, her smile faltered for a moment before returning, fake and nervous. Oh, Mr. Hale, she said loudly. So glad you could join us. We were just discussing ways to improve neighborhood security. Ethan crossed his arms. Security? Hey? You mean hiring criminals? Her smile froze. Excuse me. Derek Sloan, Ethan said, his voice calm but sharp. The fake HOA officer you brought into this neighborhood. He's been arrested. And the police know where he got his access. The room fell silent. Karen's face turned pale. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. Ethan took a step closer, lowering his voice but not his intensity. You do. You brought him here. You let him scare people for money. You told him about me and my wife. Karen shook her head rapidly. That's not true. But the way her voice trembled betrayed her. Several neighbors pulled out their phones, recording quietly. Ethan didn't yell. He didn't need to. You tried to control everyone in this community, he said. But you forgot one thing. You can't control the truth. He stepped back and looked around the room. If any of you were forced to pay fines or were threatened by this woman or her fake officer, call the sheriff's office. They'll handle the rest. The room erupted in whispers. Karen tried to speak, but no one listened. She looked around for support, but every familiar face turned away. Ethan gave her one last look, calm and steady. You wanted to intimidate my wife, he said quietly. Now you'll see what real accountability looks like. Then he walked out, leaving Karen frozen under the weight of her own fear. That evening, as the sun set, police cars arrived at the community center. Neighbors watched from their porches as officers walked inside, escorted Karen out, and drove away. No one said a word. The quiet that followed wasn't just silence, it was relief. Sarah watched from the window, her eyes glistening. Ethan stood beside her, saying nothing. She finally whispered, "It's over, isn't it?" Ethan looked out at the lake, his reflection calm. "It's never over, Sarah," he said softly. "But sometimes, justice takes the form of peace." And that night, for the first time in days, they both slept without fear, knowing the man who hit her and the woman who empowered him would never walk their streets again. The next few days brought a strange calm to the neighborhood, a quiet that didn't feel natural but heavy, like the air before a storm. Everyone knew what had happened to Karen, yet no one talked about it directly. Her house, once full of noise and arrogance, now sat dark and silent. The HOA members who had once followed her rules avoided even walking by her property. The HOA security program sign she'd proudly put near the entrance was taken down by the county after the investigation. For Sarah, it felt like the nightmare was finally fading, but Ethan knew better. Every time something big breaks, there's always something left hiding underneath. One morning, while sipping coffee on the porch, he noticed a black car parked near the corner of the street. It wasn't one he recognized. He watched quietly, noticing the way it lingered, the way the person inside seemed to be watching the houses. When he stood up, the car slowly rolled away. Sarah came outside, her voice soft. "Ethan, what's wrong?" He glanced at her, then back at the road. "Nothing yet," he said, "but I don't think this is finished." That afternoon, he got a call from Officer Reed again. "Ethan," Reed said, "you should know something. The fake officer, Derek, isn't talking. He's scared of someone bigger. We think the scam was part of a larger operation, targeting multiple HOA communities across the county. There's a name that keeps coming up, the Federation Committee. They're behind these fake enforcements." Ethan leaned back in his chair, thinking. So Karen wasn't the boss? "No," Reed said. "She was a pawn. Someone higher up paid her to let them operate in the area. We don't know who yet, but they have money and connections." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're telling me there's an entire group pretending to be HOA officials to scare people into paying fake fines?" "Exactly," Reed replied. "They act like neighborhood police, but it's all a front for extortion." Ethan looked out the window at his peaceful street. "Not on my watch," he said. That evening, he sat down with Sarah, explaining everything. She looked terrified. "Ethan, can't you just let the police handle it?" she pleaded. "They're handling it," he said calmly. "But sometimes people like this need a reason to stop. They don't stop until they meet someone who stands up." "You're that someone," she said quietly. "I am," he replied. Over the next 2 days, Ethan started noticing small details. Flyers reappearing on doors, emails from HOA regulation teams, and strangers walking around pretending to inspect lawns. The same pattern was beginning again, only more quietly. He gathered everything, photos, screenshots, videos, and sent them to Reed. "They are testing the waters again," he said in the email. That night, as Sarah prepared dinner, Ethan stood by the window and saw a figure standing across the street. The man was tall, wearing the same black jacket with HOA authority printed on the back. Ethan's pulse slowed. He walked outside silently, his boots making no sound on the pavement. "Can I help you?" he called out. The man didn't move at first. Then he turned, his face half covered by a hat. "Routine check," the man said. "Just making sure everyone's following regulations." Ethan's tone hardened. "You picked the wrong street," he said. "You work for the Federation." The man froze for a second, then turned and walked away quickly, mumbling something. Ethan watched him disappear between the houses. The next morning, he found a letter taped to his door. It wasn't from the HOA, it was unsigned, typed in bold letters. "Mind your own business, Commander. This doesn't concern you or your wife." Ethan stared at it for a long time before folding it carefully. Sarah found him a moment later. "What is that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A warning," he said. "But they made one mistake." "What mistake?" she whispered. "They reminded me who I am." That afternoon, Ethan called Reed again, telling him about the letter. Reed sounded alarmed. "They know who you are? That's not good, Ethan. You need to stay alert." Ethan smiled faintly. "I'm always alert." That evening, he drove out of town to a contact from his Navy days, a cybersecurity expert named Logan. He showed him the emails, the flyers, and the letter. Logan's fingers flew across the keyboard. "They're using fake HOA email servers, but the domain traces back to a private company in another city. This isn't random, Ethan. They're organized. Can you track them?" Ethan asked. Logan nodded. "Already on it." Hours later, Logan turned the screen toward him. "Here's your guy, the one running it all. Name's Robert Hale, no relation to you. former HOA consultant. He's been building fake HOA fronts for years, collecting millions in fines. You take him down, the whole network collapses. Ethan leaned forward. Where is he now? He's got an office downtown under a fake business name. HOA Solutions Group, Logan said. But you didn't hear that from me. On the drive home, Ethan's mind replayed everything. The slap, the threats, the fear in Sarah's eyes. He realized this wasn't just about revenge. It was about stopping people who had turned community trust into a weapon. When he got home, Sarah was waiting by the window. "You've got that look again," she said softly. "What look?" "The one you had before every mission." He smiled faintly. This time, the mission's close to home. The next day, Ethan contacted Reed and shared everything. Reed sighed, "Ethan, you really don't know how to sit still, do you?" "You know me," Ethan said. "I can't watch people like that destroy lives." Reed agreed to set up a sting operation with Ethan's help. That night, Ethan stood by his window again, looking out at the lake. The reflection of the moon shimmered across the water, calm but deceptive, just like the people he was going after. Sarah came up behind him and wrapped her arms around him. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said quietly. "Always," he replied. "But I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because people like that think no one will stand up to them. It's time someone does." He turned off the lights, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the night. The fake HOA had built their empire on fear, but they didn't know yet that fear meant nothing to a man who had faced real war. Ethan's eyes stayed on the water until dawn, his mind steady, his resolve unshakable. Tomorrow would be the day he stopped them all. The next morning arrived heavy with tension, the kind of stillness that made the air feel charged, like the quiet before thunder. Ethan woke early, his instincts sharp, his mind already planning every step of what came next. Sarah was still asleep, the faint rise and fall of her breath the only sign of peace in a world that had started to twist itself around lies. He got dressed quietly, grabbed his phone, and stepped outside, the cool morning air biting against his face. The lake looked calm again, reflecting the sunrise, but Ethan knew calm could be deceptive. Officer Reed had called him the night before to finalize their plan. They had tracked Robert Hale's fake HOA business to a large office building downtown. "He's still operating under the radar," Reed had said, "but with your evidence and our warrant, this ends tomorrow." Tomorrow was now today. Ethan took a slow breath and looked out at the quiet street. Neighbors waved as they left for work, unaware of the storm that was about to hit the people who had been running their peaceful lives from the shadows. He went back inside, poured himself a coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, writing a short note to Sarah. "Gone to meet Reed. Back soon. Stay inside. Lock up." He didn't want her near what was coming. By the time he reached the sheriff's department, Reed was waiting, standing beside two unmarked SUVs. "You ready?" Reed asked. "Always," Ethan replied. They drove out together, the city waking up around them, traffic lights blinking against the gray morning sky. When they reached the office building, it looked ordinary. Polished glass windows, clean sidewalks, nothing that hinted at corruption inside. But Ethan's trained eyes caught the little things. The fake security logo near the door, the tinted glass, the camera aimed too high to actually record anything. "They built their operation just like a real HOA," he muttered. Reed nodded. "They built fear," he said. "And fear's good business if no one fights back." The officers moved in quietly, entering the lobby, their boots echoing on the marble floor. Ethan followed behind, his expression unreadable. The receptionist froze when they flashed badges. "We need to see Robert Hale," Reed said firmly. "Now." She stammered, "He's in a meeting, he's done meeting," Ethan interrupted. "Take us to him." Moments later, they pushed open the glass door to the main office. Inside sat Robert Hale, a man in his 50s with slick gray hair and a calm smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked up as if mildly annoyed. "What's this about?" he asked smoothly. Reed stepped forward. "Robert Hale, you're under investigation for fraud, impersonation of a government entity, and organized extortion. We have a warrant to search these premises. Robert leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs casually. You have no idea what you're talking about, he said, voice cold and calm. Ethan studied him silently, noting every twitch, every subtle smirk. He recognized the type, a man who thought power meant control, that rules only applied to others. You've been targeting innocent families, Ethan said quietly. You built fake HOA programs to scare people into paying fines that didn't exist. You used fear like a weapon. Robert's smile didn't fade. And what are you, some kind of hero? He sneered. You think people don't deserve to follow rules? I gave them structure. They wanted authority. I just sold it to them. You sold them fear, Ethan said. And you used my wife's pain to do it. For a split second, Robert's smile faltered. Ah, he said slowly, recognition flashing in his eyes. You must be the Navy man. The one who made all the noise. She was the woman on the flower bed, wasn't she? Pretty, but moody. Reed moved instantly, grabbing him by the shoulder, but Ethan's hand came up, stopping him. His face stayed calm, but his eyes were ice cold. You're not worth losing my temper for, he said. But you'll answer for every bruise, every threat, every person you scared. Robert chuckled darkly, but the sound broke when one of the officers placed a thick folder on the table. Printed emails, financial statements, and recorded footage. You've been sloppy, Reed said. You left a digital trail. Every fine you collected, every account you transferred money into, it's all here. You're done. For the first time, the fake confidence drained from Robert's face. You can't prove, we already did, Reed interrupted. You'll be lucky if you see daylight again. The officers began moving around the office, collecting files, seizing hard drives. Ethan stepped aside, letting them work. He didn't need to say anything more. He had seen justice delivered in many forms, some loud, some quiet, but this one was personal. As Robert was handcuffed and led out, he turned his head toward Ethan. You think this changes anything? There'll always be someone like me, he hissed. Ethan looked at him steadily. Then there'll always be someone like me to stop you. Outside, as Robert was loaded into a patrol car, Ethan felt the tension in his chest finally ease. Reed clapped him on the shoulder. You did good, he said. Ethan nodded. Now the people he hurt can breathe again. Including your wife, Reed added. Ethan smiled faintly. Especially her. When he got home later that day, Sarah was waiting by the porch, worry in her eyes until she saw the calm on his face. It's done, she asked. He nodded. It's over. She threw her arms around him, and for the first time in weeks, he felt the weight finally lift from both of them. That evening, the sun set gently over the lake, painting everything in gold. The community gathered quietly by the water's edge. Reed had already shared the news. Every name connected to the fake HOA had been exposed. Neighbors who had once been afraid now stood together, talking, laughing, free. Sarah watched them from their porch, tears in her eyes. You did this, she said softly. Ethan shook his head. No, we did. But you never let fear win, she said. He smiled. Fear only wins if you run from it. Later that night, after the laughter faded and lights went out across the neighborhood, Ethan sat outside alone, the cool breeze rustling the trees. He looked at the stars, remembering the quiet discipline the Navy had taught him. Never react in anger, always act with purpose. He thought of Sarah's bravery, of Reed's loyalty, and of every ordinary person who had been bullied into silence. Not anymore, he whispered. The reflection of the moon shimmered on the lake, and for the first time in a long time, it looked pure again, untouched, unafraid. Ethan leaned back in his chair, letting the peace settle in. Somewhere out there, more people like Robert Hale would rise, but now this community knew how to fight back. They had learned that real strength doesn't come from rules or fear, but from standing up when it matters most. And for Ethan and Sarah, that was enough. The next few days passed with a strange mix of relief and restlessness. The neighborhood had found peace again, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unfinished. He knew from experience that when a big fish like Robert Hale was caught, smaller ones always scattered, hiding, waiting for the right time to strike again. Sarah, however, was finally smiling again. She had started gardening without fear, her hands moving confidently through the soil, planting new roses where the old ones had withered. Every time Ethan watched her from the porch, he felt a quiet sense of victory, but underneath that peace was vigilance, the kind that never really fades from a soldier. One evening, as he was closing the garage, his phone buzzed. It was Officer Reed again. "Ethan, you were right to stay alert," he said, his voice serious. "We've been interrogating Robert Hale, and it turns out one of his associates slipped through. A man named Victor Lane, one of his main enforcers, is missing. He's dangerous, used to handle collections personally. We're warning all known victims to stay sharp." Ethan's eyes narrowed, his instincts kicking in immediately. "You think he'd come here?" "He might," Reed said. "We've already sent a patrol to your area, but if you see anything suspicious, don't engage. Just call us." Ethan hung up without replying. His mind was already moving faster than his words. That night, he checked every lock, every light, and every camera feed around the house. He wasn't paranoid, he was prepared. Around midnight, while Sarah slept peacefully upstairs, Ethan sat in the living room, the soft hum of the security monitor glowing beside him. Outside, the world was silent, but silence can hide danger. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then, on the edge of the camera feed, a shadow flickered near the fence line. Ethan leaned forward. The figure moved slowly, careful not to trigger motion lights. He was tall, heavyset, wearing dark clothes and gloves. Ethan's hand moved to the drawer beside him where a small flashlight and his old Navy knife rested. He didn't plan to fight, not unless he had to, but he wouldn't let fear take over his home again. The man circled toward the back gate, trying to pry it open. Ethan moved silently through the hallway, his steps measured, controlled. He opened the back door quietly and stepped out into the cold air. The intruder froze when the motion light finally caught him, his face half hidden under a cap. "Victor Lane, I presume," Ethan said calmly. The man stiffened, surprised to hear his name. "Who the hell are you?" he growled. Ethan's voice stayed low but firm. "I'm the man whose wife your boss slapped." The man's eyes narrowed. "Ah, so you're the Navy guy. Robert mentioned you. Said you'd cause trouble." "He was right," Ethan said. "And he's in jail now." Victor took a step closer, his posture threatening. "You think that ends it? He's not the only one in this business." Ethan didn't move. "You come to my house in the middle of the night to threaten me? Bad decision." The man sneered. "I don't make threats. I finish what others started." Before he could move, Ethan clicked a small button on his phone. The floodlights around the property turned on instantly, illuminating everything. Victor froze again, his shadow stretching long across the grass. Ethan raised his phone slightly. "You're on camera, Victor. Every word, every move. You sure you want to keep going?" The man's confidence wavered, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "You think I'm scared of a camera?" he said, stepping forward again. "No," Ethan said quietly, "but you should be scared of what comes after." At that moment, the distant sound of police sirens began to echo through the street. Victor's eyes widened as he realized the trap. "You called them already?" Ethan's tone didn't change. "I've been talking to them all week. You were sloppy. They traced your burner phone when you sent that letter to my house." Victor's face twisted in anger. "You think you've won? You can't stop us all," he shouted, backing away toward the fence. "We built fear. It doesn't die easy." Ethan took a slow step forward, his eyes locked on Victor. "Neither does justice." The sirens grew louder until flashing lights filled the street. Victor turned and tried to run, but two officers tackled him at the edge of the lawn, pinning him to the ground. He struggled, shouting curses that echoed uselessly in the night. Ethan stood still, watching as they handcuffed him. Reed got out of one of the patrol cars, his face serious but relieved. "Guess you didn't listen when I said don't engage," he muttered. Ethan shrugged. He came to me. I just turned on the lights. Reed smirked. Well, you just helped us catch the last loose end. That's the guy responsible for half the intimidation jobs across the region. You've done more for this case than most detectives. Ethan nodded slightly. Just doing what's right. As they loaded Victor into the car, the man glared at Ethan. You think this ends with me? He spat. Ethan looked at him one last time. No, he said calmly. It ends when people stop being afraid. The car drove away, the sirens fading into the distance, leaving behind only the hum of crickets and the rustle of the trees. Ethan exhaled slowly, finally letting his body relax. Sarah appeared at the back door, wrapped in a blanket, her voice trembling. What happened? He walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. It's over, he said softly. For real this time. You promise? She whispered. Ethan smiled gently. I promise. The next morning, the whole neighborhood buzzed with the story of the midnight arrest. Some had seen the lights, others had heard the sirens, and by breakfast, everyone knew that the last man behind the fake HOA ring had been caught. People who once feared stepping outside now waved to one another again, and the air that had felt heavy for so long finally felt alive. That evening, the community gathered by the lake for the first time in weeks. Sarah stood beside Ethan, watching the reflection of the sunset ripple across the water. You did it, she said quietly. Ethan shook his head. We did it. This neighborhood just learned that real strength comes from standing together. She leaned her head against his shoulder. What now? She asked. He looked at the lake, peaceful and endless. Now we live, he said simply. And as the orange light faded into the calm blue of night, the last shadows of fear drifted away with it, leaving behind a community that would never be silent again. A week later the neighborhood looked like it had been reborn. The lawns were greener, children played on the sidewalks again, and the sound of laughter returned to a place that had once lived under the shadow of fear. For Sarah, the days finally felt normal again. She could water her plants without looking over her shoulder, and she no longer woke up in the middle of the night to check the locks. Ethan, however, was still restless inside, even though everything seemed peaceful. He sat on the porch most mornings with his coffee, watching the calm lake, his mind wandering between silence and memory. He had seen wars, faced danger in foreign lands, but somehow this battle at home had felt heavier. It wasn't about survival this time. It was about dignity, about protecting the simple peace his wife deserved. One morning, while he was tightening the fence post near the yard, Officer Reed pulled up in his patrol car. Ethan looked up with a faint smile. You finally off duty? He asked. Reed grinned. Not even close, but I thought you'd want to hear this in person. He stepped out, holding a folder. The case is officially closed. Robert Hale and his crew took plea deals. The Federation Committee's entire network is done. Every account frozen, every operation dismantled. You were right, it was bigger than we thought, but your evidence broke it wide open. Ethan took the folder and flipped through the documents silently. You did good, Commander, Reed said softly. You gave people their community back. Ethan handed the folder back, a faint smile forming. It wasn't just me. Fear only survives when no one stands up to it. Reed nodded, glancing at Sarah in the garden. She stood up too. Most people would have moved away after what happened. Ethan looked at her, his eyes softening. She's tougher than she thinks. Reed chuckled. I'd say she married the right guy. Ethan smiled faintly. Or maybe I married the right woman. They shook hands before Reed left, promising to stop by for dinner sometime. After the patrol car disappeared down the road, Ethan walked back to the porch and sat down, watching Sarah pull weeds from the flowerbed. The same flowerbed where it had all started. The same place where the slap had echoed and started a storm that changed everything. He closed his eyes for a moment, hearing the faint sound of the breeze through the trees, the laughter of children nearby, the steady rhythm of normal life returning. Later that afternoon, several neighbors stopped by. Bill, the old man who had lived there for 20 years, came carrying a basket of fresh vegetables. You know, son, he said, setting it down on the porch. "I've lived here a long time, and I've seen trouble come and go, but what you did, standing up to those people, gave this neighborhood its soul back." Ethan shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Bill. I just did what anyone should have done." "Not everyone would have," Bill said. "You didn't just stop them. You taught everyone here to stop being scared of titles and uniforms." As the sun dipped lower, more residents stopped by, bringing food, flowers, small tokens of thanks. Sarah smiled shyly, overwhelmed by the warmth of people she once thought were too afraid to care. "You see," Ethan whispered to her, "fear's only powerful until people see through it." That evening, the HOA building, the same one that once housed Karen's meetings and fake rules, was turned into a community center. Ethan helped move the old furniture out, laughing with a group of younger residents. They painted the walls, fixed the broken lights, and hung a new sign out front. "Lakeside Community, for everyone." No more fake authority, no more threats. Just people looking out for each other. When the work was done, they gathered outside by the lake. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and gold. Sarah leaned on Ethan's shoulder as they watched the reflection of the water shimmer softly. "It's strange," she said, her voice gentle. "All this started because of a man pretending to have power." Ethan nodded slowly. "That's how it usually starts," he said. "Someone pretending they're more important than the rest. But it ends when people remember they're equal." "And you reminded them," she said. He smiled faintly. "We both did." The sound of laughter and chatter filled the air as neighbors began lighting small lanterns by the shore. Each one glowed softly, floating across the lake like tiny stars on water. A young boy ran up to Ethan and handed him one. "This one's for you, mister," he said cheerfully. Ethan crouched down, smiling. "What's it for?" "Mom said we're lighting them for people who helped the neighborhood." Ethan chuckled softly, taking the lantern. "Then let's send it off together." He placed the lantern gently on the surface of the water, watching it drift away with the others, glowing brighter as it caught the reflection of the sunset. Sarah slipped her hand into his, her smile quiet but full of peace. "So," she whispered, "does the Navy teach you how to handle things like this?" Ethan looked at her and smiled. "No," he said. "Life does." As the lanterns floated farther, their reflections dancing like embers on the calm lake, Ethan finally felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, true stillness. No more threats, no more investigations, just peace earned the hard way. The next morning, as dawn broke, the community woke to find the lake shining under the early sun. The sign at the entrance, once a reminder of fear, now read "Welcome Home." And in that small, quiet neighborhood that had once been ruled by intimidation, people learned the same lesson Ethan had always known. True authority doesn't come from badges or power, it comes from courage, from standing tall even when no one else does. Sarah looked at Ethan across the breakfast table and smiled, her eyes bright and steady. "You know," she said softly, "you may have retired from the Navy, but I don't think you'll ever stop being a commander." Ethan smiled, sipping his coffee. "Maybe not," he said, looking out at the peaceful water. "But at least now, I'm commanding peace." The wind rustled the trees gently, the sound blending with the laughter of children outside. The war at home was finally over, and the calm that followed wasn't empty. It was earned, one act of courage at a time.